Hello everybody, Anthony Gonzalez here. Thanks for joining us on our second Facebook Live quarterly update. This one, happy to report, is at the very end of our initial push congressionally, so we all get to go back to our home districts for the month of August, which is great. But just wanted to give you a quick update on what we've been working on in the office, and then we have a stack of your questions here, which we'll get through as many as we can in the hour. And then separately, after this, I'm going to post a video specifically on my border visit. I went down to the border last weekend with a bipartisan group. It was 8 Republicans, 8 Democrats, which I think was really important to do it that way. Most groups are partisan groups, and so not surprisingly, not much gets done. But this one was different in a lot of ways, and I think the insights are important and very powerful, and I know it's important to everybody on a variety of fronts, and so I'm going to share that in a separate video, which will come right after this. But we will get into a little bit of border stuff too. So without further ado, first I want to start on the constituent service side. One of the things that I've committed to, that our office is committed to, is to make sure that we are providing A+ constituent services, so that if you need our office for anything, whatever it is, if the federal government can do it, we want to do it. We want to provide A+ service, and I think we've done a great job on that, frankly. I'm really, really proud of the team. They've done just a tremendous job across the board, and I'd encourage you, if we can help in any way, to please reach out, because that's what we're here for. We can argue about issues all day long, but when it comes to providing service, we're all in this together, right? So I'm proud of the work we've done. Our first 6 months, we responded to over 10,133 of your letters, met with 536 different groups and businesses in the 16th district, plus a few more in DC. I hosted 4 roundtables. Just to highlight a few, we've opened 809 cases on your behalf with the federal government, ranging from helping one person get the permits he needed from the Department of Treasury to open his brewery, to securing over $28,000 in IRS refunds for taxpayers. Our Veteran Resource Tour is still going strong, with another event this quarter in North Olmsted. These are great events. Brian Bowman in our office coordinates these primarily, and they're fantastic. What we do with these Veteran Resource Tours is we bring all the different veteran service organizations into one place, and then publicize those so our veterans kind of have a one-stop shop. What we hear a lot from folks when we have these is, hey, this was great. Now I don't have to drive into Cleveland and probably get a parking ticket. I can just come to North Olmsted or Canton or wherever we happen to have it. And so we're going to continue to do those. The other things on the veteran side that has been really fun and just unbelievably powerful is presenting medals to our veterans. So a lot of our veterans are incredible people, first of all, but they're also very humble people. And usually they've won a lot of medals that they just never bothered collecting, or they don't feel comfortable speaking about. So families will reach out to us on behalf of the veterans to see if we can track down medals. And we're always able to do that, or I should say we're usually able to do that, which is always fun. So those are on the veteran side. And then we've also sent 17 grant support letters to the federal government and completed 40 military, as I just said, 40 military service medal requests with another 111 cases pending. So we're working hard on that. On the grant side, one thing I want to say, we also have another member of our team who focuses all day, every day on getting federal grant dollars into our community. I want to make sure that we're getting our fair share here in the 16th district. So he is focused, Mike Cunnington's his name, he is focused exclusively on bringing those dollars back to Ohio 16. So if you have a grant request, if you're city government or whatever, please reach out to us, and we're going to do everything we can. Specific legislation that I want to highlight before we get into the questions. So first is the Jobs Act. I introduced the House version of the Jobs Act along with a handful of colleagues, a bipartisan bill. Senator Portman and Senator Kaine have it in the Senate. I think it's a great bill. What it would do is it would expand Pell Grants to short-term programs that are approved by state departments of education. So today the Pell Grant is primarily used for four-year college, and four-year college is fantastic for a lot of people. It was great for me, great for a lot of folks, but it's not for everybody. And I want to make sure that there are as many paths into the economy as humanly possible. And to me, having more flexibility with the Pell Grant is one great way of doing it. So with this bill, if it were to pass, and we're working hard on it, you would be able to apply it to things like CDL school or trade school or whatever it is. If the government, the state government says, hey, this is an approved program, then you could apply the Pell Grant to that. So I think it's a great tool for getting some of our lower income students into different career paths. Again, college is great, it's fantastic. I loved my experience, certainly. But it's not for everybody, and I want to open up opportunities. So really excited about the Jobs Act. We've been working hard to acquire additional co-sponsors for that, which I think is important. Secondly, law enforcement bill for mental health calls. So this one I'm working with Senator Sherrod Brown, Senator Jim Inhofe, and Congresswoman Kendra Horn, to keep our police force and communities safe by improving police training for behavioral health crisis situations. Think of this as a way to provide training for our law enforcement when it comes to things like opiate addictions and dealing with the different mental health crises that we have in our society. Our folks in law enforcement have some of the most difficult jobs in the world, frankly. This specifically is one area where I think we can do a better job at the federal level of supporting our law enforcement. And so as the opiate crisis continues to destroy a lot of our communities, I want to make sure that we're providing the resources to our law enforcement folks. And again, this one's bipartisan, bicameral. That's kind of where I like to play in that space. I think it certainly raises your ability to get something done. And so we're hopeful on that. Second to last, SASTA. So Securing American Science and Technology Act. This is a bill that I introduced in the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. I'm on that committee as well as Financial Services. And what this would do is provide greater clarity and coordination for our research institutes with law enforcement and intelligence agencies. So right now, you've heard a lot about China stealing our technology. They do that in a variety of ways. One of the ways they do it is they just steal it from companies. So our companies invent something, our companies want to enter the Chinese market. They basically have a rule that says, if you want to do this, you need to make a whole bunch of changes, and one of them usually involves giving your intellectual property, which you've fought for and won and researched and developed and spent a lot of money on. And so I certainly want to crack down on that. This takes it in a different direction. This is the second thing that China does. So China right now has people in our research institutions throughout the country at the university level, but also just federally funded research generally. And these are very smart people. They're great engineers. They're great, talented people. But what happens is the Chinese government will come here, find those individuals who've been working on federally funded research, sometimes sensitive, and they will throw a whole bunch of money at them in what's called the 1,000 Talents Program. If you Google 1,000 Talents Program, you can see what I'm talking about. And what they basically do is they take the individuals who've been researching using our dollars in our labs and move them to China. And when they move them to China with this lavish package, the goal is to transfer that technology. So it's a way that they steal directly from our universities. And again, this is federally funded research. I'm somebody who thinks we need to do a better job on our research and make it more efficient and make sure that we're advancing technology generally. But I'm going to be darn sure that the Chinese aren't stealing it or anybody else. And so this bill would crack down on that. Really proud of that bill. And then lastly, and this is probably my number one priority, is USMCA. So USMCA is inarguably, in my opinion, an upgrade to NAFTA. We have an independent council, the USITC. Their sole purpose is to advise Congress on trade deals. It is not a partisan group. It is a nonpartisan group that looks at trade deals, evaluates how they will affect the economy, and then presents that to the Congress. USITC came back, said USMCA would raise GDP by over 1/3%. It would create over 170,000 jobs. It would raise all sectors of the economy, and it explicitly calls out agriculture and manufacturing, which are enormously important to Ohio's 16th district. And so to me, this is a no-brainer. This is an upgrade. It's an important upgrade. We had a hearing on this that in financial services that the Democrats called with all Democrat witnesses except for one. And everybody except for one agreed that USMCA is an upgrade over NAFTA and we should sign it. And so I'm not seeing a great reason not to do it, frankly. I know that my colleagues on the other side have some concerns, but what I'm doing and what I'm spending my time on is addressing those concerns, meeting with them individually, talking to them on the House floor, wherever I have an opportunity, checking the temperature on the other side of the aisle to see if we can get USMCA done. I think if we got that done, I think it would be incredibly beneficial for Northeast Ohio's economy, and I'm really passionate about it because it would literally lift all boats, in particular the ones that happen to be in our district in agriculture and manufacturing. So I am really excited about that. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get it done. We need, basically from a kind of structure standpoint, we need Speaker Pelosi to put it on the floor. If she doesn't put it on the floor, it's not going to happen. So, what we're hearing is that there's some movement on that. They have some concerns. That's fine. Happy to address those concerns. But at a basic level, this is good for our economy. It's really good for Northeast Ohio's economy. So I'll be working hard on that, and please follow it. And then with that, we will get into your questions. So I have some here. First one, and we have some repeat folks, so that's fine. First one's from Lori. Very nice to see you are willing to work with the Democrats on issues. What plans do you and Rep. Allred have for Ohio 16 and his district? So to give folks background, if you didn't see the story, so Colin Allred is a member of Congress, Democrat member of Congress from Texas. Colin played football for the Titans. I played for the Colts. So we knew each other from our NFL days, more by reputation than personally, but have connected, in our first couple months here in Congress on a variety of issues. And really, frankly, I just consider him a friend. He's a good guy. We see the world differently, but he's a good man, good family man, and I have a ton of respect for him. So he's going to come to the district, to Ohio, for a day during the district work period, or the August work period. And we're going to do a variety of things. We're going to go to Fatheads, where I need to have my wings, which I love, best wings. But then we're going to do some manufacturing tours, and then we're going to do a town hall. And I think it's important to do the town hall. I'm going to do two town halls, one with Colin and one by myself. So don't think we're just doing that one. But this one with Colin, I think, is really important because it's going to give everybody an opportunity, one, to hear from two members of Congress instead of one, but also, I think, to see how people can be from different parties, see the world a little bit differently, but still get along and respect each other and have important civil dialogues on really big issues. I think a lot of what you see on social media, especially in cable news, frankly, is poison to our society. The vitriol, the anger, it doesn't reflect how most people are in the community, thank God, but it pollutes how you think about how politics are, especially in DC. I have found more people to be like Colin than to be like some of the crazies that you see on television. And so I think it's important that he and I kind of model that behavior. And it'll be a great discussion. You guys can ask anything you want to either one of us, but I do think it's important to do it together. And then I'm going to reciprocate. I'll go to his district probably next year. So thanks for that question. This one comes from Jennifer. What are you doing to help your constituents in the lower and middle class? So great question. Thank you for asking that. I'm going to kind of put things in three buckets and bear with me for a second. So when I think of, kind of how do you help families and individuals, I think about building skills and capacity. So like education, think education, training, workforce. Access to capital. So making sure that people have an opportunity to enter the economy, borrow at reasonable rates, and compound wealth in that way. And then what I would call the third bucket, like essentials. And in that sense, I think healthcare, think home ownership, things that are sort of the building blocks of a good society, of a stable society. So that's how I think of things, right? And I have bills I'm working on in each bucket. So on the skill side, I already talked about the Jobs Act. So the Jobs Act is specifically tailored for low-income students. And again, this would give people the opportunity to apply Pell Grants to more than four-year college, get some flexibility there, so that if college isn't the right path for you, you have an opportunity to build skills, build capacity, so that you have more entry paths into the economy. That is the entire goal of that bill. That is all that it's about. So that's one on the skill side, skills and building capacity. Let's get the Jobs Act done. Let's give people more opportunity in the economy. Second is on student loans. This one, admittedly, is a little bit harder to fully grasp, because, I shouldn't say fully grasp, but to legislate on, because the federal government is so entwined in the student loan business. But the way that I'm focused on it is trying to find ways to bring the cost of tuition down and make college more affordable. So remember, the reason people have debt is because tuition is high. If tuition were lower, the debt wouldn't be there, or it would be less, certainly. So what I'm trying to figure out is different ways that folks can pay for college, and different ways that we can get the cost down. Similar to healthcare, we need to get the cost down. The cost curve needs to come down, and so I'm working on that. On the capital side, two major things there. So, we're going to build capacity, we're going to get you skills, make sure you're trained and all that. On the capital side, one of the things that I've been focused on pretty exclusively in the Financial Services Committee, which I'm on, is finding ways to expand affordable credit for low and middle income families. If you are a very wealthy individual, or you come from a wealthy family, chances are you can borrow money at really, really cheap rates, like 2% or sometimes 0%. If you are a lower income folks, if you're a lower income family, lower income individual, your borrowing rate can be in the hundreds of percent. And I don't care who you are. If you're Warren Buffett, you can't make money on a 100% loan. So 100% rate loan. So how do you solve that? One of the things I'm working on in financial services is to allow for more competition in the loan industry, in particular looking into alternative data sets. So there are companies today, and you can find them online, that basically can bring down the cost of borrowing because they're accessing different information when it comes to scoring individuals. And so right now the FICO score and the credit rating agencies are kind of the ones who have a stranglehold on that market. They're not very innovative. The scores are hard to change. And so that's kind of where the rates are. These companies are doing work differently. They're looking at different information, alternative data, if you will, and able to provide affordable capital that way. So that's one thing I'm working on. And then in the essential section on the healthcare side, I kind of raised my hand when I got here saying, I want to be somebody who works on healthcare on behalf of the Republican Party. We have been lost on healthcare in many ways for the last decade. And it's been one of my big frustrations. And so I'm working on what will ultimately be a comprehensive healthcare plan that I hope to rally my colleagues around. The basic goals of which are going to be bring down the cost of healthcare across the board, and also do this and expand access to insurance. I think we can get more people covered at lower costs and ensure that nobody goes bankrupt as a result of healthcare. And you can do all that without mandates, and you can do all that by bringing the cost to the federal government down. That's the direction we're headed. And then one quick thing, I just have to say it. Being a no on Medicare for all is probably the most important thing that any legislator should strive for right now. Medicare for all, if we implemented Medicare for all today, and you live in Wayne County, any rural county, hospitals are closing because the Medicare reimbursement rates are so low, and the mix of patients is so high on Medicare that nobody could survive. And so Medicare for all would be an absolute disaster. Not to mention your taxes would go through the roof. But when it comes to the actual effects that it would have on the community, I think it's probably the worst proposal that I'm seeing right now, other than the Green New Deal, and we'll talk about that. That's kind of what I'm against. The more importantly, I think, is what I'm for, which is to find a way to bring down the cost, expand access, and make sure nobody goes bankrupt as a result of the healthcare expenses. So great question. Sorry, that's a long answer. This one, Mr. Carusis. I don't know. what your name is, but this is at Mr. Carusis. So what is your position on the Green New Deal? So I kind of just got into this a little bit. I think the Green New Deal, frankly, is the worst proposal I've ever seen in my life. I think it would absolutely decimate Northeast Ohio. It's hard to, it's bad for a lot of reasons. So here's just number one. It's scientifically impossible. It's mathematically impossible. It won't work. And it's a complete, it's almost, if you read it, it almost reads like a new country. It's like, I can't fathom how we would do it. A federal jobs guarantee, Medicare for all, what else is in there? Upgrade every single building in the United States, get completely off of fossil fuels. So how would you actually do that, right? Like, what's the cost of that? We would have to raise energy prices in Northeast Ohio to such a degree that I promise you, we would have families choosing between feeding their kids or putting gas in their car. Energy prices would go through the roof if we did the Green New Deal. Now, I said it's mathematically impossible, so what does that mean? So I have this. Okay, so the goal is to upgrade all existing buildings to full energy efficiency. So the estimates differ somewhat, but there are roughly 100 million single-family homes and apartment, commercial, industrial, and government buildings in the U.S. That would require retrofitting well over 4,000 buildings an hour for 12 years. That's impossible. Just installing solar takes 2 to 3 months on average. And so that just gets into like the feasibility side of it, but it would also be ungodly expensive. And so I think it's a terrible bill. I'm actually like, the fact that people support it, it's somewhat embarrassing. But that's where I am on Medicare for All. Robert from Canton. Question via deal. I have 2 questions. Everyone needs food, clothing, shelter, and healthcare. The first 3 are controlled by the market. Why not healthcare? So I think what you just said is 100% right. People say, well, don't we have a free market system in healthcare today, as the counter to, you know, why we need to go to something like Medicare for All. They say, well, we already have a free market healthcare system, and that's not working. I would argue, which I think you're implying in this question, that we do not have a free market healthcare system. For any market, doesn't matter what we're talking about, you need cost visibility, you need to know what things cost, and you need to be able to make value trade-offs. If you don't understand cost or quality, you don't have a market. You have something different. And in the healthcare market, it's very hard to do either. So in most instances, you have no idea what something in the healthcare space is going to cost before you consume it. And you have very little ability to assess quality. And so the 2 kind of fundamental building blocks of a market aren't there. And part of my plan will be to restore those, because I agree with you. I think a true market, which is what they have, by the way, what they have in a lot of the countries that have universal health care, they actually have a free market version of universal health care. So I think it's actually important to distinguish between Medicare for All, which is full government takeover of healthcare system, socialized medicine, and a free market version of universal health care. And in many countries, what they have, like Singapore being one, is before you go, like have a baby, for example, you can price shop. You can go and see what the delivery costs are going to be at the different hospitals. You can see what the different quality environments are. You can see the ratings of the doctors, all kinds of things. That is a market-based system because people are actually making value trade-offs. And that, they, by the way, have, I think they spend roughly $1,800 per person on healthcare. The society does, not the government, whereas we're per year, whereas we're up around 10,000. So I do think a set of market-based reforms can work, and you're right that healthcare in this country is not a free market system at all, in my opinion. This one, Elizabeth from Fairview Park. This one's on student loans. Dear Representative Gonzalez, what are your thoughts on student loan forgiveness? With Senator Sanders and Senator Warren both pitching ideas, I am curious, where do you stand? So I am not for student loan forgiveness. What I am for is finding ways to get the cost of higher education down and expanding more opportunities into the market. So a couple stats on student loans. Number one, roughly a third of our population goes to college and ends up taking out loans. So that means 2/3 don't. So 2/3 of the population won't benefit from this, but they will pay for it. And so when you look at how, my understanding of how those plans are going to pay for this is they're going to do something called a financial transaction tax. And it's pitched as this is hitting Wall Street. This is going to hit Wall Street. It is not going to hit Wall Street. So a financial transaction tax basically says anytime you trade a stock, anytime anybody trades a stock, there's going to be a tax on that. Well, what are the overwhelming majority of pension funds and 401ks invested in? They're invested in mutual funds and index funds. I personally am invested in index funds. And so what does that mean? That means that those taxes are going to be paid by the investors in the funds because those taxes hit the operating income. They don't hit Vanguard. Vanguard will not pay a dime in tax on a financial transaction tax. But if you're invested in Vanguard, you will pay, and anybody will pay. And so that's where I think I'm against it for a variety of reasons. One, like I said, you're talking about subsidizing a third of the population. And by the way, that third who has college degrees, that's the wealthiest third. So you're going to take from everybody to subsidize the wealthiest third of the population, which doesn't make sense to me. And then how you're going to do it, you're going to get directly from retirees who are invested in mutual funds and index funds. So I don't think that's a good idea, personally, though I do think that finding ways to get the cost of college down and expanding opportunities through things like the Jobs Act are a good idea. But I appreciate the question. Okay, this one's from Amber in Norton. I'm contacting you because I'm a concerned American. There's so much fighting between the Republicans and Democrats. Why can't we work together to take care of our nation? Why does it have to all be about who is in control? Amber, I share this frustration so deeply. Thank you for the question. So I'll tell you what I'm doing. Since day one, have basically committed to trying to find folks on the other side of the aisle who I can build relationships with and work with on important legislation for our country. The good news is I actually think there's a fair number of people in this town who are committed to doing just that. There are a lot of folks who are not, unfortunately, but there's a good, healthy number that I have found. And it's easy for me to work with folks on my side of the aisle because ideologically we're aligned. A little harder on the other side of the aisle, so you have to be more proactive about finding people. And so that's what I've been doing. And on top of that, I think it's important for me to model that behavior so that you see it, so that everybody in the district sees it. Yes, we have a representative who I may disagree with on a whole host of issues, but at the very least, he's working with people across the aisle to try to get things done. That's my commitment to you. I think it's important. That's why one of the reasons I'm having Colin Allred, Representative Allred, come into Cleveland, and I'll reciprocate, come into the district. And it's also why when I went down to the border, I did it in a bipartisan fashion. It's really hard to solve problems when you just stay in your silo all day, but it's a lot easier if you see things through the same lens. So thank you for that question. Ms. Blonsky from North Royalton. I see that President Trump is trying to start a war with Iran. Where do you stand on this? So thanks for your question. I disagree with the premise. I don't think he's trying to start a war with Iran. And I'm glad I don't think that, because I am not for a war with Iran. Having said that, if they attack us, we will strike back, and we should. I am not somebody who thinks we should just let Iran do whatever they please and hit our ships or knock our drones or whatever it is that they plan to do. If they're attacking Americans, if they're attacking our soldiers, if they're attacking our vessels, then there should be consequences. But in terms of going to war and starting a war with Iran, absent that, I am not for that. So I think you and I are in agreement, I think, that a war with Iran at this point does not make sense. But the Iranians are they seem to be doing everything they can to provoke a conflict by taking over vessels and also attacking different ships. I think it's something that we need to monitor. But if starting a war with Iran, I'm certainly not for. But I also don't think the president is. So that's good. Let's see. So this one's on border visit. I'll be quick with this because, like I said, we're going to do another video just on the border. So this one's from Tim. So were there instances of poor conditions in the holding camps on the border? You post about everyone agreeing that the system is broke, leads me to think there may be truth to those accusations. So great question. Here's how I think of the conditions, okay? And then we can get into policy. But so here's the flow, right? Basically, you have three types of facilities. You have Border Patrol facilities that are run by CBP. You have ports of entry, and you have ICE facilities. And then you have a court system at the very end. The courts are unbelievably backlogged, right? So like the very last piece of the chain is a giant bottleneck. It takes 2 to 3 years to have your case heard in the court system. And so what happens is, as a result of that backlog, the ICE beds are overcrowded. And I didn't see any ICE beds, by the way. ICE beds are primarily in the interior of the country. We were down at the border. We were in McAllen, Texas. But anyway, so the ICE beds are overcrowded. There's no space there. As a result, the CBP facilities and the ports of entry are overcrowded. And so you have this situation where, because it takes so long to get a court date, all of the facilities are packed. And where they're overcrowded, the conditions aren't great, admittedly. And so that's where you'll see pictures of, and I saw this in one of the facilities, of folks kind of standing in a holding area where they can't lie down, and not kids, but adults, where they can't lie down, they can't really sleep, and it's difficult. Like there is no way around it at all. Those conditions are brutal. But the reason why is because, again, there's a bottleneck in the courts, and there's a flow coming from the Northern Triangle that is putting us at overcapacity. And so how does the law that Congress has written, how does the law say we treat that? Catch and release, which I'm totally against, 100% against. And so the entire system is taxed. One thing I will say that I think is important, there's rhetoric out there that the Border Patrol agents are somehow bad people. And I've seen some of the posts in the Facebook group. I get that there are some bad apples. We got to take care of that. Any group, you're going to have bad apples. I will tell you a bipartisan insight that everybody on my trip had. Those are good people. Those are good people who are working really hard, who we have put in an impossible situation. The situation that we have put Border Patrol in, which is a law enforcement organization, is to basically be caretakers on top of law enforcement. These are mothers, fathers, grandparents, grandmothers. These are folks who are working hard. They're tired, frankly. They're tired because they're being stretched so thin, and they're doing things that aren't a part of their job. But they're working hard, and I'm glad that they're there. So I think this conversation around border, we have concentration camps down there, and the Border Patrol is like the SS. I flatly reject that, and frankly, I think it's not helpful. Like, let's remind ourselves what concentration camps were. Concentration camps is where Jews were held against their will and gassed to death. That's a concentration camp, okay? And we have examples all over Europe where you can go look at them. What's happening at the border is a tragic crisis in every way, but those are not concentration camps. And the Border Patrol agents are not bad people. They are great people. They're great people who we as Congress have put in an impossible situation. And so my focus is working with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to make sure that we fix our laws, we fix our broken immigration system. We, Congress. The president, whether you're talking about President Trump, President Obama, doesn't matter who the president is, if the laws don't change, we're going to have a problem. And so the law needs to change. That's our job. So that's what I'm working on. But thank you for the question. This one's from Andy in Worcester. Is there a reason you did not vote yes for H.R. 6? There was a chance to fix the immigrants in our country who are working and paying taxes, so wondering why you did not vote for passage of this bill. So this was the DACA bill, or what has been referred to as the DACA bill. So I voted no for a handful of reasons. I'll give you quickly. So one, it expanded the population way beyond DACA. This was not just about DACA. I think the final number was like a couple million, maybe just shy of 2 million that it applied to. So it wasn't just DACA, it was a lot more than DACA. Number two, it explicitly prevented consulting with gang databases to determine who could stay and who couldn't. So frankly, I have no idea why that provision was in there. I was shocked to see it there. But basically it said, when you're doing background checks, you can't consult gang databases. That doesn't make sense to me. And then the second and the final point is there was no border security. As a general rule, I'm somebody who thinks everybody needs to go through the same immigration process. This created a special pathway that was independent of the immigration system, the current immigration system. I think everybody needs to be treated the same. So everybody goes in the same way and treated, in my opinion, that's what's fair, is to do it that way. So, but the big ones were the prevention of the gang database and the expansion beyond just DACA. So we got a couple more. So a Mueller report, this one, we've got one from them already. Okay, so this is a good question. How much of the Mueller report have you read personally? This one's from Richie. I've read all of it. I read it the first weekend it came out. And then there's a lot of questions about, when are you going to hold a town hall so you can articulate your position on the Mueller report? What is being done to protect our elections, and why won't Mitch McConnell bring any bills to the floor for a vote? How much should be read personally? So anyway, it's all kind of in the same realm on Mueller. So I did read the report. Like I said, I read it as soon as it came out. And I'll give you kind of my general take on it. And I also, by the way, watched a good bit of the hearings that took place the other day. So here's what I found. I didn't see any collusion at all, despite the fact that Russia tried as hard as they could to force collusion, and I didn't see any when I read the report, and neither did Robert Mueller. And what I did see, though, is a lot of Russian attempts to influence our social media platforms, basically to sow division in the country. So if you focus on the first half or the first third of the Mueller report, that's all about the Russian influence campaign, which, by the way, they've been doing since the 50s. So this is an old Cold War tactic that's always been a part of their playbook. And I think the only thing that's really changed, or the main thing that's changed, is the technology's different. And so before they were doing it through newspapers and radio, they still do it through radio with less newspapers, but now they're doing it on social media. And it's kind of turbocharged the operation, frankly. And so what I've done, me personally, is I am a part of a bipartisan task force that is focused on what I would call the first third of the report. So let's do everything we can to make sure that whether it's Russia, Iran, China, ISIS, whoever it is, that they're not able to unduly influence our political system or use our platforms against us. One of my colleagues on that task force, named Alyssa Slotkin, has a good quote, which she says, "If we're gonna fight each other, gosh dang it, it's going to be Americans." And I think that's actually fair. The goal should be to make sure that we're protecting certainly our election infrastructure, but also cleaning up our platforms. And so that's kind of what I've been working on. Let's focus on that. Let's make sure that we all have confidence in our political system, and that nobody's able to influence it. And there are a handful of bills that we're putting forth that we should be writing over the break, that we'll introduce in September, that I'm hopeful will pass. But beyond that, the other thing I'll say, there's talk about impeachment. I am 100% against that. I don't see any. Look, I think there was a lot of bad judgment expressed, but nothing that that leads to impeachment. And by the way, the Democrats seem to agree. We voted on that, and I think they only had 90 people vote for it. So there's not even a consensus on the Democrat side that that's the right thing to do, and they're certainly not on the Republican side. But the big thing, again, I think let's focus on what we can actually agree on, and that's that the first third of the report should scare a lot of people, and we can put some common sense disclosure requirements and things like that in place to make sure that we cut that down. So let's see. We'll do this one. Yep. Oh, we're good on time. So this is from Elizabeth. I was pleased to see, I'm going to read two things on this, by the way, because I think it's important to see the different perspectives. I was pleased to see you express concern about President Trump's recent tweets targeting 4 of your fellow new members of Congress, but troubled to see that you chose to vote against the House resolution condemning those racist attacks the following day. It does not seem to be the case that you're opposed to this kind of legislation in general, as you voted in favor of H.R. 183. Further, the resolution was correct that this kind of language legitimizes and increases fear and hatred of new Americans and people of color. By the very next night, a Trump rally was chanting, "Send her back." The rest of the resolution affirms that immigrants and their descendants have made America stronger. There's a lot of stuff on that. Can you help us understand why you chose to vote no on this resolution? So, great question, and I'm going to answer it. I'm going to read another person's question, though, because I think it helps frame it. This one's from, I assume, somebody, I can't figure out how to pronounce that. It's a Twitter handle. But anyway, as a supporter, I agree with your voting. As a supporter, if you can't support the president, just stay mum. My community supports the president. Not everyone likes the tweeting. No need to comment. You are a freshman legislator. So I think kind of those two frame it pretty well for me anyway. So look, here's kind of my take on it. So number one, I saw the comments. I tweeted my response, and that fully captured my opinion of the situation. The bill that we voted on, and by the way, I think a lot of Republicans, I think most of the Ohio delegation basically released something similar to what I said on the Republican side. The resolution that we voted on, that's a sense of the House, which means that the House of Representatives feels this way. That was written entirely by the Democratic Party, with no insight or input from us, and didn't accurately reflect my opinion of the comments or anything. And so I voted no on it for that reason. The other reason, frankly, is we had a situation come up earlier in the year where one of our members, Ilhan Omar, made some pretty anti-Semitic remarks. She basically said, anybody who supports Israel is bought and paid for by the Jewish people. Frankly, that's insulting. It's insulting for a lot of reasons. It's anti-Semitic, it's insulting to the Jewish people for sure, but it's insulting to me as a member, implying that I am somehow can be bought, which is false and is just absurd. It's so disrespectful to your colleagues, frankly. And we had an opportunity to speak out against that. And we were going to bring a bill up, I think when it was first discussed, that was going to condemn that. It wasn't going to name her, but it was going to condemn that specifically. And so what did we do instead? The whole process was hijacked by the squad, is my understanding. And basically we put a bill together that was an amalgamation of all forms of hatred that you could come up with a heavy focus on white supremacy, and just voted on that. So we didn't call out Ilhan Omar's remarks. We didn't call those out specifically. We went with this anti-everything bill, which I reluctantly voted for, frankly, because I thought it was kind of a charade. After that vote, I said, you know what? I'm not playing these games anymore. Unless these bills accurately reflect my sentiments, and I feel like they're reflected in the bill, I'm not voting for them. And so, that's kind of where I came out on it. But on the second part, from the other person who mentioned, not everyone likes the tweeting. You don't need to comment. You're a freshman legislator. Honestly, I agree with you on that. So here's what I'll say. Look, I'm not going to love everything that's tweeted or said in this country, but I'm also not going to spend all my time policing Twitter. Like, my job is to work on legislation that is going to improve the lives of the 16th district, and that is going to be my focus. My focus is going to be on USMCA. My focus is going to be on bringing the cost of healthcare down, getting the Jobs Act passed, passing legislation that's actually going to improve your lives. And look, everybody can make up their own mind about the tweets and the comments and all those sorts of things. But for me personally, I'm going to be working. I'm going to be working on legislation. And so my sense is, if you're someone who wants me to be tweeting more or condemning more people and being a part of that game, you'll probably be disappointed. If you're somebody who wants a member of Congress who's going to put all those things aside and just work and just focus on legislation that's going to hopefully make your life better, I hope you'll be pleased, because that's what my focus is going to be. And so I appreciate the question, and I certainly understand where everybody is on it. Let's see. So we have two more. These will be quick. This one's on abortion from Steve. If Ohio indeed does make most abortions illegal, will you make sure the same legislation/bill that makes most abortions illegal also organizes a state taxpayer-funded foster care adoption system for the women who want/need abortions but won't legally be allowed to? So great question. I'll say this. So you're referencing a state law, and so I can't pass anything in the Ohio General Assembly, obviously. But I think you bring up an important point, which is around foster care and adoption. So I'm somebody who thinks we do need to be way more supportive of our foster care system and our adoption services. And so I am looking for ways, and my team is looking for ways to make sure that we can do basically what you're saying, but maybe at the federal level. So we are looking at ways to support our adoption services and our foster care system. So thank you for that question. I agree with you on it. And then the last one is on federal spending. So Jennifer writes, other than cutting services, what are you doing to reduce the deficit? So great question. The number one driver of the deficit, number one by far, is the cost of healthcare, specifically Medicare. And so one of the reasons why I am working on a healthcare plan that's going to bring the cost of the healthcare system down is because that by itself, if all you did was reduce the cost of healthcare, let's say by 25%, which is a big number, but if that's all you did, you would reduce the deficit by a substantial amount. And so that's the reason why I'm focused on that. I think our fiscal situation and our debt and deficit is long-term probably the biggest challenge we have. We can't invest in anything. We can't do infrastructure. We can't do anything because we don't have the money right now. Where our fiscal house is a mess, and it's not getting better, frankly. And so the number one thing I'm doing is trying to get the cost of the healthcare system down. If we do that, that'll reduce the deficit. And then in addition, I just voted against this budget deal that was passed. It's hard to call it a deal, frankly. But that basically lifted or suspended the debt limit for the next 2 years. I'm not somebody who thinks that's a good idea. I think we need to be look, it's an imperfect mechanism, but I think we need to be forced to make real trade-offs. And by doing that, I think we're just relinquishing our responsibility. But it is a massive challenge, admittedly. And that's why I want to work specifically on the healthcare side, because I think it'll be helpful. So that is our final question. One final thing I do want to announce again, if I didn't already, if you haven't seen already, I'll be hosting a bipartisan in-person town hall at Wadsworth City Council chambers with Texas Democrat Congressman Colin Allred on Thursday at 5 p.m. To attend that town hall, you will need to register for a free ticket via our Eventbrite. Link is in the post, and arrive at the event with your ticket and a photo ID in hand to gain admission. That's for security purposes. We want to make sure that everybody who's there is a constituent and is who they say they are. I think that's important. My number one goal is to give you guys great information, but as part of that, we need to secure the area. And so that's why we're doing it that way. I hope to see you there. And then please take a minute to subscribe to my weekly newsletter to stay up to date on what I'm working on. My comms director will be very happy I read that. And thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all your questions and consideration. And as always, thank you for allowing me to be your member of Congress. Thank you.